Welcome to Return of God's Glory YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be going over Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. This is very simple to unlock and become clear of the deception of Genesis 2 through 3. It's very simple, but we must go through an exercise. You have to train yourself. You have to exercise. You have to use your brain. You have to use your spiritual discernment. You've got to exercise these things. You have to think. You have to, God said, come, let us reason together. Honestly, I believe that God has made this so simple, and truth is so simple that anyone who can function at a second grade level, free of Satan's spirit, can break this deception with exercise, through law of use, through effort. You got to come together with God. Let us reason together. We went over in a couple of previous tapes that God, in his creative power, says, let there be light. God, in his creative power, is saying, let us reason together. This invitation is powerful in the power of God. So, if anyone feels any sense of ineptitude or lack of ability, or you're dependent upon other people, you're dependent. You think, well, I can't do this myself. I've got to rely upon a pastor. I've got to rely upon someone other than myself. God is calling us to rely upon him. Come, let us reason together. Let us. There's creative power in it. He's going to give you this ability. He says that if any lack wisdom, ask of him. So he's inviting you. He's saying, I'm going to empower you. And this is the simplicity of a second grader, but yet the power of it is immeasurable worth, and the power of the ability to see God's face as he is, and all the power that comes from that. As he said, let there be light. Come, let us reason together. So there's creative power in this. So let's take a look, and let's not minimize our own, as long as we're born of the Spirit of God. Now, a person can be blocked by Satan's spirit because there is no truth in him. He cannot see or know the truth. So, you know how, I'm going to segue a little bit. You know how, like, these liberals, when conservatives will speak to them and say, well, what about this? What about that? And the liberals act like they can't hear or understand anything that the conservatives are saying, that it's just past their scope of reason to hear what the conservatives are saying. So they ignore it as if it doesn't exist, as if truth doesn't exist, as if the points the conservatives are making don't exist and are not anywhere within their scope of vision or sight. I don't think that they're faking. And that doesn't mean that they're generally stupid. It means they may be of the devil, and there's no truth in him, so they cannot see, hear, or know truth. So I'm not saying that this is easy for everyone. I'm not saying that everyone can get this, and that anyone who can think at a second grade level can get this. No, you must be able to know truth for this to have the creative power of God within you that will awaken you in power to see the face of God as he is. This takes the Holy Spirit, because we are discussing lines and precepts that come from the kingdom of God. And, in John 3, it says, you cannot even see the kingdom unless you're born of God. So you can't understand spiritual things, just like the liberals who we think are playing dumb, because why wouldn't you be able to hear what the conservatives are saying as they speak simple logic? But it's a spiritual thing. All right, let's move on here. We're going to talk about days. Um, Genesis 1 is a 6-day creation. And there was evening and there was morning one day. And over here, and there was evening and there was morning a second day. This happens to be the American Standard Version, so other versions will say this in a little different manner. And there was evening and there was morning a third day. And there was evening and there was morning a fourth day. And there was evening and there was morning a fifth day. And there was evening and there was morning the sixth day. All right, so we can see that there's a difference in Genesis 1 and Genesis 2. Now we're going to look at Genesis 2. So we saw that Genesis 1 is cataloging a very sequential 6-day creation. But Genesis 2:4 begins the second creation story that I'm telling you is an absolute pagan myth. It does not correspond or correlate to Genesis 1 in any way. And as we compare and contrast, we're going to see that these are written by two different authors. There are two distinct creation stories that conflict and contradict in every way, and found two different and opposite religions. Genesis 2 is fully pagan. Okay, so this author, and they put it in the Bible because they want to interject a pagan religion into the Bible to cause Christians and the world to believe that this pagan religion is Christianity, but it's not Christianity. It is the beast system, which is pagan religion of the worship of man as God. All right, 2:4. These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created, in the day that Jehovah God made earth and heaven. Now, as I've shown you in the last one, this author calls God Jehovah God. And that's how you know it's a different author written at a different time. Genesis 1 just says God. I'm not going to go into the root language. It's different because you're hearing Jehovah God in Genesis 2, but you're hearing God in Genesis 1. There's different, go into that yourselves because I don't go into that level depth in these tapes. That would be a deep dive that you would do, but you can obviously see that the name for God is different, which means you're dealing with a different age. You're dealing with a different author who wrote Genesis 2 at a different age than Genesis 1 was written. In the age of Genesis 2, they were calling God Jehovah. That's a different age than in Genesis 1 because he's not called Jehovah God here. So we see that in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So that was done, quote unquote, in the beginning. And light and darkness was created on the first day. On the second day here, God called the firmament heaven. So God created heaven on the second day. And then we go to verse 9, and God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. And God called the dry land earth. So this was the third day. You had the heaven created on the second day, the earth created on the third day. But Genesis 2 only states one day. It says, "These are the generations of the heavens and of the earth when they were created, in the day that Jehovah God made earth and heaven." Well, earth and heaven were not created on the same day in Genesis 1. They were created, the heaven was created on day 2. The earth was created, the dry land, on day 3. So these weren't created on the same day. So basically this has a wholly different creation order in Genesis 2. It's not the same creation story. It's not an addendum to Genesis 1. It's not giving you more specifics than Genesis 1. It's a fully different and opposite creation story. This one says the heaven and earth were created, but no plant in the field was yet in the earth. Okay, let's go back to Genesis 1. Let's do our due diligence to see if this person is lying to us or telling us the truth. No plant of the field was yet in the earth in the day Jehovah made earth and heaven. Okay, in Genesis 1, we see it was the third day, which heaven, which was created on the second day, and earth, which was created on the third day, when these were done. In the day that they were created, heaven and earth, if we just go with heaven and earth, in the day that they were created was the third day in Genesis 1. Now let's look and see. And God called, verse 10, the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth put forth grass, herbs yielding seed, and fruit trees bearing fruit after their kind, wherein is the seed thereof upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, herbs yielding seed after their kind, and trees bearing fruit, wherein is the seed thereof after their kind. And God saw that it was good. So on this third day, when heaven and earth were created, if we try to look at it as a joint finality of the heaven and earth being created, God created on that day fruit trees, grass, and herbs. So he brought forth all of these plants and trees on the third day. Let's go to Genesis 2 again. This different creation story says, and no plant of the field was yet in the earth. So this is not the sixth day. If we said that it was the third day, if we tried to go with that, ignoring the fact that this is all a one-day creation of heaven and earth, where actually it was the second day that heaven was made and the third day that earth was made. And we said, okay, well, we're going to take this at the point of the third day when the dry land and the seas appeared, and say at that point there was no plant of the field yet in the earth, and no herb of the field had yet sprung up. This says no, none. And obviously by day 3 in the Genesis 1 story, at the end of day 3, yes, there were plants, trees, grass, herbs, all of that was in place. And no herb of the field had yet sprung up, for Jehovah God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. Okay, in this creation story, man has to be created before there are any plants of the field created, before there are any herbs of the field sprung up. They can't be created until man is created. And there's nothing yet in this entire creation of the heaven and the earth. There's no plant in the earth. There's no herb, nothing until man is created. This is not an addendum to Genesis 1. This is in complete opposition to Genesis 1. We see in Genesis 1 that on this third day, all of the grass, the herbs, and the trees are in the ground. All of them. All of them. And it said none of them in Genesis 2. In Genesis 2, these things cannot be created. And there's nothing in the earth. Nothing in the earth. No herbs, no plants, no grass, no trees, nothing. Because man hasn't yet been created. And man, in Genesis 1, male and female are both created at the same time after all of the herbs, the trees, the animals, everything is created before male and female human beings in Genesis 1. On the sixth day, after all the animals, after everything, male and female are created at the same time. It is completely erroneous to state that man had to be created before the plant, the trees, the grass, the herbs in the Genesis 1 creation. That shows you that Genesis 2 is a completely distinct story. In this story, no plant of the field, no herb of the field could spring up because man was not yet created. This is not the same creation story. They don't correspond. They don't correlate. Genesis 1 and Genesis 2 are mutually exclusive creation stories by two different authors, two different spirits, two different gods, two different creations, two different religions. This is not, they don't belong in the same Bible. God bless you.